episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of our show with another fascinating guest who is helping to create a better tomorrow for so many people. We have the honor today of being joined by Hélène Huby, who is currently Vice President of Orion European Service Module Unit at Airbus Defence Space, which is the European Space Agency's contribution to the NASA Orion spacecraft that ultimately will send astronauts to the moon and beyond. And this unit will provide electricity, water, oxygen, nitrogen, as well as keeping the spacecraft at the right temperature and on course. And for all of our American viewers and listeners who are not familiar, Airbus is a European multinational aerospace corporation, currently the world's largest airline producer. Prior to this role, Hélène was the head of innovation at Airbus Defence Space, where she grew a portfolio of over 50 new businesses, ranging from space database services to electrical power stratospheric drones, was responsible for setting up Airbus Ventures and their innovation center in Silicon Valley for the Airbus Group. Privately, Hélène invests in a variety of tech startups. She serves as a senior advisor for Red River Rest Venture Capital Fund, as well as on the boards of several startups in the United States, China, and the EU. She is the co-founder of the Microbiome Foundation, an anchor partner at the Unis Social Business Organization, founder and chairman of Airbus Ventures. Prior to Airbus, Hélène worked for Faber Novel, which is a European digital seed investment innovation consulting company. She began her career in the media sector, where she launched a variety of innovative projects on the web. She's currently a member, a young leader of the French-American Foundation, graduated from the École Normale Supérieure with a master's in economics and mathematics, applied mathematics, and from École Nationale Administration with a master's in public administration. Welcome, Hélène Huby, to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's our pleasure. I'd love to start off, as we typically do, with handing you the floor for a couple minutes, just to talk about yourself, a little bit about your background, everything from where you grew up, and a little bit of your journey from sort of public administration and mathematics and economics to thinking about the cosmos.
Okay, well, you've described the journey already pretty well, but I'll try to, let's say, complement a little bit.
Please.
It's true that, so indeed, I started by studying mathematics and economics because I wanted to work for the World Bank. I wanted to save the world, and I thought, my place would be at the World Bank. But actually, while doing some, master thesis about, motivation of the corruption in Uganda, I realized economics and math are really great, but I'd like to do something which is more focused on, let's say, humans, and more with humans than with models and mathematics. So that's the reason why I went to École Nationale d'Administration, which is a bit like the Kennedy School in the US, right? So it's the school you do to if you want to enter in politics, or if you want to become a House Study 7, basically to serve your country. So after that, I started indeed by serving my country in the first administration and negotiating being one of the people to negotiate the research framework at European at the European level, representing the French government. But basically, I felt like I could give more, so that's the reason why I joined a very, very small company based in Brussels. The company was bankrupt, and I supported the restart of the company. Basically, I moved from math to the administration to an almost bankrupt company. And the reason is about what is my impact? How can I use my talents? How can I unleash the energy, the talent each of us have? And so it took some time, right? But at the end, I figured out that the best for me was in the private sector, and was in coordination, in cooperation with innovative projects and small companies. So I did that for about 10 years. I had the chance to participate to the creation of the first startup accelerator in France, the first startup co-working space in France. Had a chance, as you mentioned, to start several projects on the web. At the time when the web was disrupting, the old, let's say, the incumbent media industry. And in this position, I had the chance to see more and more internet disrupting incumbent businesses. So it started with the media industry, but then went to the telco industry with Skype, then went to the retail industry, etc., etc. So when I entered Airbus, so first of all, I'm not an aerospace engineer. So I entered as someone coming from, let's say, the digital environment.
Sure.
With a DNA which was Airbus compatible, because let's say the studies I did in France are very typical studies for people working at, let's say, executive level at Airbus. And so there was, on the one hand, this innovative spirit, innovation, startup experience. On the other hand, sorry for this, yeah. On the other hand, yeah, let's say a background which is really in the thinking and the values of Airbus. And when I entered Airbus and I discovered that people like Elon Musk, like Jeff Bezos were entering the space business, it was kind of obvious that space would change completely. So I had the chance, as you mentioned, to become quite fast after 6 months head of innovation at Airbus Defence Space. It was a great journey. I think I had the chance, it's very rare in big company like Airbus, that you really have the opportunity to impact and to transform the company. I had the chance to benefit from the trust of the CEO of Airbus, Tom Enders, who understood quite fast, actually, the impact that the transformation of space and the impact that people like Musk and Bezos would have on the space business. So that's the reason why he created Airbus Ventures and Airbus Innovation Center in Silicon Valley. And actually, I had the chance to be really next to him and basically bringing him in Silicon Valley, organizing for him the meeting with startups, etc., in Silicon Valley, so that he could understand the kind of big trends that would disrupt first space and then potentially the aeronautical industry. So that's a bit of my, let's say, my experience at Airbus. If I take one lesson of that, is that if you are convinced about something, and I was convinced that space would change dramatically, I started to explain that to everyone around me. And as you can imagine, most of the people, they said, no, it's not true, and space is hard, and I mean, things you can imagine, of course. Sure. But it was so important. I tried really hard, and at the end, I managed to have an interview with Tom Enders, and he understood the potential of transformation in space business. So, as let's say, a sharing of experience, it's really, if you believe something is important for the company you serve or for the mission you have, just try harder. And at the end, if you're right, someone will listen. I had the chance, it was the CEO who listened to me. So after being head of innovation, indeed, I wanted to have more operational responsibilities. And also, while being head of innovation, I had the chance to, let's say, learn a lot about what is space, etc. But I really wanted to be hands-on, let's say, in a real space program, and to understand what's the day-to-day business of doing and building amazing, spacecraft. So that's the reason why I ended up being vice president Orion-ESM. And it's a great honor and it's a great pleasure to contribute to bring back humanity to the moon. It's a unique cooperation between the US and Europe. It's the first time in European history that we're going to fly humans with, okay, we are not building the whole spacecraft. I mean, you described it perfectly. We are building the propulsion system, the thermal system, the power navigating system, and the life support system. So, but it's a significant amount, of course, of the spacecraft. We are kind of the machine room of the spacecraft, and the Americans are responsible for the flight software and the capsule that where the astronaut will be. But without them, there'll be no Orion. Without us, there'll be no Orion. So it's really a very joint, very strong cooperations between the US and Europe. And that's also something unique. So it's first time in Europe that we're building a spacecraft that will carry humans in space, and first time in Europe also that we are on the critical path of such an important mission, of such an important American mission. So it's, I mean, from my perspective, it's really a great honor. What is also amazing when you work on such a program is that it's two things. First, we really live that on a daily basis. We are just one member of the team. And the whole success of the program is depending of every member of the team. If someone does not do his or her job to his or her best, there is a risk of failure, because even if it's very high tech, of course, even if we take a lot of margins, etc., at the end there are there is lots of let's say judgment, decisions taken by humans based on humans, information brought by humans, etc. And it's sometimes so complex that you have 1, 2, 3 key people who have the very core competence of that valve or that model of the way the dynamics of the fluid is going to happen, etc., etc. And so at the end, your decision is based on the knowledge, the very core knowledge of lots of people. And if one of these people is wrong, there might be a chance, right, that this has spillover effects, and at the end you end up with an impact which is, well, can be at the end a very important failure. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that we are so at the edge of the technology, and the system is so complex that when you work on such a program, you really rely on the competence of the people of your team. And of course, you rely on the processes, and of course, you rely on the, especially on digital processes, etc. But at the end, it's about the competence of the people. And this is giving to you a unique feeling of being part of a team whose each member is indispensable to the success. And this is very rare. It's not always in industry that you can say, okay, I am part of not only I'm part of a great mission, but I'm a member of a team, and this team has a unique responsibility to make our spacecraft a success. And I think that's very specific to space, and that's something I really enjoy in my work. And then the second thing, as I was saying, is being part of something which is much greater than who you are. Oh, yeah. We work for a greater goal. We work for bringing back humanity to the moon. We do that in cooperation with the US, which is also something very important. So that's a big message, and that's a very important responsibility and mission. So, yeah.
No, it's outstanding. It's a fascinating journey so far, and I just I love hearing that, you know, with everything wrong going on down here nowadays, that we can get along, countries can get along up there and make things work. So it's that's also really exciting. You know, you're involved in so much, from sort of the very, I mentioned the Orion project to you know, you spend a lot of time in what I'll call space tech venturing, and I'd love to start off there a little bit, because, you know, I've watched some presentations, some lectures that you've given where you talk about the democratization of space, how a lot of things that you're looking at in the venture segment revolve around this theme. I'd be very interested if you could talk a little about that, but also what is sort of the current ecosystem of space venture capital? I come from the biotech arena, and, you know, everything in my field is pretty much, you know, give me some money and 10 years later you have a drug. In your field, you know, you have stuff that, you know, maybe certain antenna technology, I'm speaking out of that need to be up there in 18 months, but obviously getting to Mars takes a little longer, different amount of money. What are some of the different things that you look at in sort of the space tech ecosystem when you make investments?
Okay, so I'll try to answer your questions in let's say in 2 steps. Perhaps step number 1, a bit about the trend that we have seen in the past 5 to 7 years, and then step number 2, exactly your question. So what is my focus today?
Sure.
As an investor. So in the past let's say in the past 10 years, it's public knowledge to say that space has completely changed. If we look back 10 years ago, there were no usable launchers. The company Planet was created about 10 years ago. So the company that transformed Earth observation by putting the first constellation of microsatellites in space and providing lots of data, with the bet that at the end there is a point about accuracy of imagery, but there is even a more important point about the frequency of the revisit of the imagery. And if you don't have a super high accuracy, but you have a very frequent revisit, then probably you can gather much more information than with just a very high accuracy imagery. But so there was no, let's say, microsatellites or very limited microsatellites constellation. There was almost no 10 years ago private investment into space, and there was very limited number of space startups. And now, and you look just a few weeks ago, right? Rocket Lab is now introduced in the Nasdaq through a SPAC at a more than 4 billion valuation. Then just some weeks ago, it was the company Astra, the micro launcher Astra. And then just in December, it was the company Momentus. So the ecosystem has completely changed. There were several drives from that. Of course, one very big drive is the huge progress made by Elon Musk and SpaceX. They've really made kind of space affordable. And for me, SpaceX is a bit like, Google or etc. If you look at the internet, there were one big wave of internet with the time of the Google, etc. And now Google is there, right? It's the search infrastructure of the internet.
Sure.
And SpaceX, I think, is about to become the transportation and potentially the communication infrastructure of space. There'll probably not be one, but it's currently really the dominant player. And this has basically within less than 10 years has reduced the cost, the price per kilogram of sending something to space has decreased from about $15,000 per kilogram to now we are about $3,000 per kilogram. So huge decrease. And at the same time, the need for communication coming from space, so the need to be connected everywhere at every time. The need of data from space can be Earth imagery data, for example, to optimize activities on the Earth has grown and will continue to grow, right? Because we need to take care of our planet. So we need to optimize more and more activities. So just as an example, let's say you want to optimize, let's just take an example, right? 70% of the water consumption in the world is coming from irrigation.
Okay.
So you say, okay, you want to reduce significantly the water consumption in the world, then you want to tackle irrigation because that's a very big usage of water in the world. And if you want to improve irrigation, probably you're going to use, on the one hand, imagery from space, right? That will be able to measure how the crop is growing, able also to measure somehow the humidity of the Earth, and also some sensors inside. And you'll mix this data, so sensors on the Earth plus imagery from space, to optimize the way you put fertilizers and or water in your field, basically. And for that, you need imagery from space, and you need also connectivity, right? Because your sensors on the Earth, they need to be connected, right? So that's a very typical example of how space can serve a need on the Earth. And of course, to do that, you would need to have a permanent connectivity, and you need to have very, very high revisit imagery, because you don't want to use an imagery which is dated from 1 week ago. You want to use an imagery which is dated from a few hours ago to be very precise in the way you're going to put your fertilizer, you're going to put water on your field, right? So if you want to have an imagery which is just a few hours ago, you need to have constellations, you need to have satellites around the Earth that revisit the same point at a high frequency. And for that, you need if you want to send plenty of satellites so that they can revisit very fast the same point on the Earth, you need to be able to produce the satellite for very low cost, and you need to be able to send the satellite for very low cost. And that's basically the revolution that has happened in the past 10 years, is that we are now able to send satellites for significant lower cost than we were before, and we are now able to produce satellites for a significant lower cost than we were before. And this has given birth to what is called new space. So I was saying one drive is really, let's say, the magnificent progress of SpaceX. Another drive is also the way NASA has given contracts to startups, had put into competition startups and corporate. At the very early phase of the program. I take one or two examples, but so for example, the travel to the ISS. Okay. NASA has say, put in place a system which is called service contract. And at the beginning, they're saying, okay, I'm going to sell a service. The service is travel astronauts or bring astronauts to the ISS. And you in a big program like this, you have phase A, phase B, phase C, D. So you have different phases for the development of your spacecraft.
Sure.
And they've decided not to give the contract for the, let's say, design phase to just one company. NASA decided to give the contract for design phase to several companies so that they'll still maintain the competition between these companies. And that's how SpaceX got the first contract to design Dragon. And so I'm taking the example of servicing the ISS, but now it's, for example, servicing the moon. How you're going to, bring payloads on the moon. And it's exactly the same method that has been applied by NASA. They have given many contracts to different companies, and you see a mix of, let's say, incumbent companies, corporates, and mixed with startups, and that has given a great impulse to the startup ecosystem in the US. So to summarize, basically, there was this big, let's say, push of SpaceX that enabled a cost of access to space to go really very low, and on the other hand, this new way of contracting from NASA that has given much more money actually to startups and the first contract, and much more credibility to startups. And so we've seen a complete change of the space ecosystem. We've as a result, constellations of microsatellites. As a result, new services emerging from this constellation. So space-based information to optimize market, to optimize farming, to optimize transportation, to optimize mining, etc., to optimize supply chain, warehousing, etc. And also, if I look again in the past, since 5 years, a disruption in the communication area with the mega communication like Starlink, OneWeb, GW in China. So here we're talking about, for China and for Starlink, 20,000 satellites in low Earth orbit, providing connectivity to the world. And this is just 10 to 5 years ago. So now where I have interest in. So I think that I like to take the example of the internet, right?
Sure.
There was a big wave with Google and etc. And then you had the 2.0, right? With Uber, with Spotify, etc.
Yep.
So for me, the question is, what is now the Spotify and the Uber of new space? Because the infrastructure is there more or less.
Yep.
So, and I think one direction is space exploration. The infrastructure is there to send satellite to etc. But what are we going to do? And of course, one next move is of course space exploration. And I think that there'll be a disruption in the space exploration business, as important as we have seen in the past 5 to 10 years in the Earth observation, communication, and launcher business. So I'm looking in this area, and the second area is weather. I think that's an area which is still a little bit untapped. We've seen lots of space companies in Earth observation, and with various captors, infrared, radar, etc., video, normal imagery. Lots of space companies in transportation, with more than 100 micro launchers in the world. Lots of space companies in communication. Many companies, startups doing IoT from space.
Sure.
Much bigger companies trying to do this mega constellation. But there was not so far a breakthrough in weather. And I'm kind of looking for or waiting for, a startup or a company saying, okay, with new kind of sensors, etc., I can predict with an accuracy of 90% of 90% 1 week, and accuracy of 1 meter. Of course, wow. It's kind of I don't know if it would exist, etc., but the point is the local precision, right, and the time precision.
Yeah.
And I've not seen the breakthrough there, but I think the breakthrough this is one area where there is no reason why there wouldn't be a breakthrough. And that's kind of one of the untapped areas. So exploration, weather, and also whatever you want to do in space, right? So 3D printing in space, very, very large structures in space that can serve space itself. So print antenna, print structure, etc., but also the Earth. So that's a bit more, let's say, fancy or crazy, etc. But if we explore further, we will need relays of communication, relays of energy, etc. So that's the time probably now to build these relays, and it's an infrastructure. So the first we succeed with communication relays, with energy relay, probably will be the one, again, having the infrastructure for a very long time. And last but not least, but that's again a big question mark, if we want again to travel, etc., we'll need probably a new type of propulsion. If you look at on the Earth, the kind of progress of transportation, you've been able to go from A to B around the world, because you've been able to because transportation has made progress. It's now faster, it's cheaper, right? And it can carry bigger amount of payload, basically bigger stuff, right? You have huge carriers, huge boats, huge airplanes, etc. Because it's a question of energy, the price per kilogram. So bigger. It's currently being done by Elon Musk, by the Chinese with March 9. So Elon Musk with Starship. Jeff Bezos is working on New Glenn, etc. So bigger, okay. Cheaper, yes, with reusability, of course. But faster, we would need a new type of propulsion. And because with the current propulsion we have, which is a chemical propulsion, you can improve it to a certain extent, but you will not significantly, by an order of magnitude, go faster. And that's why you have now more and more research being done in the US, some startups also working on nuclear propulsion. So to summarize, perhaps, the areas I'm really looking at are the, let's say, Spotify, Uber of the space, let's say 2.0, right? So it can be about debris management, can be about big infrastructures, things being done in space after 3D printing. So second area is exploration, which I think is going to be disrupted. Third area is weather, and the fourth area is new type of propulsion. With different time frame of development for all of these themes, but that's really what excites me currently.
Fascinating. And along those lines, just wondering, because a few episodes ago, I spent time with Ilya Montanari at the European Space Agency, talking about sort of their small business innovation work there, and you talked a little bit about some of the non-space organizations that they work with, that whether it's today or whether something's going to be coming back from space that's important to them. I think Coca-Cola was a partner, BASF in the chemical space. Obviously nothing confidential, but any interesting sort of co-investors / partners that you work with that we might not normally think of as being interested in space? Any interesting anecdotes along those lines?
Yeah, it's difficult to talk about.
Sure.
I can give because most of that is a bit confidential, but
sure.
I can give some, let's say, some general examples, right, of industries that I believe should be or interested in the space business. So one is, of course, the hospitality industry, which is currently is facing difficulties because of the COVID, but yeah, that's not for, hopefully now with the vaccine, not for too long, because space tourism is going to be a reality, and we see that with Axiom, right, who is just now raised, I think it was their Series C, and the valuation of the company is more than 1 billion. And they are building this commercial space station that they'll attach to the ISS. So it's a first step. It's really it's in its infancy, but it starts, right? And if you look at New Shepard, so they flew now, I think it's 14 times successfully. So probably they are kind of very, very near to the first flight where they can embark humans. And Musk is also proposing this year already to embark humans for touristic destinations and touristic tours. So I don't know when, of course, exactly that's going to happen. But when space tourism is happening, I mean, that's I think going to be a breakthrough. You just take the example of the aviation, and you see how commercial aviation has transformed the aviation business. It has been a very, very big driver for safety, for industrial production, etc. So I believe hospitality businesses shall be more and more interested to see what they can do around space, to either prepare private astronauts to train and or to be the one operating, hosting, commercial space station or etc. So that's one point. Second point is everything which relates to exploration. So we are, now in the drive to set up a sustainable settlement in the moon first, and then in March.
Yep.
And there are many questions, right? I mean, just one very simple: how are you going to produce energy?
Yep.
You have 14 days night in the moon, and it goes approximately up to below minus 150 degrees Celsius. So it's quite it's quite cold, and that's a question which is not answered today, and that's typically a question where space companies and energy companies can work together, right? NASA has now done some prototyping about nuclear powered very small station. There are other ideas, etc. But that's for example really an area where energy companies and space companies could very well work together. Another area is resource exploration. Let's take oil and gas company who have explored, the resource on Earth. They are perfectly fit. I think there is a lot of, commonalities on the technology then to explore what kind of resources, or where is water on the moon and how you're going to extract water on the moon, right? Because there are probably a lot of similarities between how you extract oil on the Earth and how you extract water on the moon. It's not the same. It's ice water. There are very different challenges, etc. But yeah, again, I mean, very important technologies have been developed on Earth that can be reused, I think, in this area in space. So these are a few examples. So hospitality, energy, exploration. That's where I think the merge between, let's say, non-space business and space business is really producing an added value.
Wonderful.
And that's for in-space activities. And now if we look, down, let's say, down the road or in the application side, of course, this is more like the usage of space data and how we use space. Here also I see a few areas. I mean, one very common is of course insurance, financial markets, etc. for predictions, but especially insurance.
Sure.
Because weather is super important for insurance. So that's the other area. Of course, is agriculture. We just discussed an example a few minutes ago about the optimization of irrigation and putting fertilizers. So that's pretty common. And let's say the blocking point here is more like the usage. Is it easy to use? And but this will come. Transportation also to optimize logistics, supply chain. In Africa, for example, there is a startup which is working quite well. It's called Theyve. It's based in Rwanda, and they've optimized by 50% the supply chain of the farmers using space data, because people don't know where they shall sell at best their merchandise, right? I mean, what they have produced basically. And so you have approximately, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 40% of what has been produced, which is lost because it's stored, but perhaps not in very good condition, etc., etc. So if you're able to predict what will be more or less, how much production you're going to have on the one hand, and second, to say, okay, it's best that today you go to this market, tomorrow you go to this market, etc., because you can see who is there and how much is sold, etc. Of course, you help a lot managing the supply chain, and you avoid to have, let's say, wasted agricultural products. So that's another example.
Really cool. Really cool. Hélène, aside from obviously your role at Airbus and then your multiple roles in sort of the venture capital community, you are also the founder and chairman of a nonprofit called the Carmen Group, which is also involved in a variety of space-based activities. Can you talk a little bit about why you set this up and what are some of the goals of this organization?
Okay, thanks for your question. Yeah, so I co-founded the Carmen project 1 year and a half ago. It's a foundation, non-profit foundation. It's based in Europe, in Berlin. We are there for a minimum of 10 years. We have the chance to be funded by some European families, and we have visibility, so it's very comfortable. The reason why I founded that, and I also wanted to have the stability, is because I mean, we just discussed about how space is changing, etc., etc.
Sure.
So you have more and more commercial competition in space, which is great because it drives innovation. You also have more and more geopolitical tensions in space, because the more space is used as a critical infrastructure for positioning, for communicating, for gathering Earth data, you know, Earth observation data that are of course critical for military observation, but also critical for now more and more optimizing of activities. So the more basically space is becoming critical, the more it's important to master product infrastructure, which are there, and the more, of course, it becomes, you know, an area for, let's say, strategic action. So hence the creation of a space force in the US. We also have a space force now in, I mean, not the same size, right? But the space force in France, and the Chinese government also. Well, they have a different setup, but they're also, of course, looking very, very carefully about, you know, how to use space in a strategic purpose and how to protect their very key asset in space. So you see this rise of competition, you see this rise of, let's say, global geopolitical tensions. And what I strongly believe is that space is not an industry like the others. We look at space when we are children. It speaks to our heart. It speaks to our minds, you know, it speaks to our emotion because it's beautiful. So it speaks to our artistic capability. It speaks to our scientific capability because it's triggered by space that we want to understand the universe. It speaks to our engineering capabilities because we want to go there. So we want to build machines to go there, etc. So it's a very, very special industry. And if we look down the road and we think about exploration, we think about how we're going to explore together, I believe that it's very important that we are still, despite, I would say, this geopolitical tension and despite this increased commercial competition, we are still able to find ways to cooperate. So the Carmen project is all about that. It's a platform where people who are shaping the future of space can meet, they can speak with authenticity. So they don't speak because they are coming from China or from the US, or they're coming from a corporation or a space agency, etc. They speak first and foremost because they are shaping the future of space and they want to share their understanding of the future of space with others. And so we create at the Carmen project the condition for this independent dialogue. That is to say, all the discussions which are under the Carmen project umbrella are kept secret. And you are asked to speak as a person. So when you enter the Carmen project, you sign a charter which says, yes, I enter the Carmen project. I will keep the secrecy of all discussions and I will speak as a person. Of course, you can do business deals, etc. That's not the point. But you speak first and foremost as someone who is willing to impact space, transform space. And then, okay, you are owner of a business or you are, you know, coming from this or that country, etc. So this creates a safe place, which is unique because it actually, I may be wrong, but I'm not sure it exists in the space world, this safe place where you can share your dreams. I'm not naive. I mean, you can share some tragic understanding, etc., with others in a safe environment. So the way we do that, we select every year 15 fellows around the world. So 15 people we believe are shaping the future of space industry. So of course, these people have outstanding achievements, etc. But they need also to have a cooperative mindset, right? And then we organize for them a leadership program. So it's organized into 2 pillars. The first pillar is a leadership week called Carmen Week. We invite for 2 days global leaders coming from space and non-space industries. So again, everything under this secrecy. We had the chance to have last year, for example, Evan Spiegel speaking to the fellows, Yo-Yo speaking to the fellows, etc. So these leaders, they share about their experience, right, in various sectors. And for the fellows, it's the time to open their minds, to understand better the world as it is. And it's also leadership journey because you have the chance to speak with outstanding leaders for 1 hour, just 15 people, just this outstanding leader in secret. And the discussion is a very high quality, very high authenticity discussion. Then we spend 1 day with the previous cohort because we want to create a very strong alumni network. And the last day of the Carmen week, we organize some DARPA-like challenges. So we group people into teams, and we ask stupid questions like how you want to go to Mars into 2 days, right? So it just triggers a lot of appetite and very, very interesting discussions. And at the end, okay, there is some gala dinner with very important people in space and space adjacent industries. And here at this dinner, we also try to inspire, because it's always the same idea about how to foster cooperation, right? So to inspire, we work with one artist during the year, and we present at this gala dinner what we call Space 10, which are 10 headlines, so fake news related to space, of course. That's what that would happen in 10 years. And each news is illustrated by the artist. And of course, we explain, from a tech point of view, from this point of view, why this news could happen. But at the end, it's about the artist and the news, and it's about imagination and emotion. And this triggers in the mind of the people kind of, and if you're a key decision maker in space and you have this kind of your imagination, your emotion triggered by this artistic representation of what could happen in 10 years, then it triggers thoughts, right? It inspires you, and perhaps you take a little bit different decisions or not, but you cannot stay just indifferent if you receive this, let's say, this mix of beauty and technical inspiration. So this is what we are doing basically with the foundation. And we ask every fellow at the end of this program to take a commitment to further advance something which is important for the fellow, him or herself, but in cooperation. So the commitment has to somehow foster also cooperation. It can be very small, can be I'm going to write an article, but for example, we had last year a fellow saying, okay, we're going to build a network between the space agencies of new space countries, and we're going to share best practices. So that's one example of commitment. Some other fellows were saying, okay, we're going to broadcast some coding lessons in Africa because, some had some bandwidth. The other one has were having some, let's say, coding content. The other one was based in Africa, etc. So it's can be various projects, simple, more complex, but we ask for a commitment so that these people continue to somehow to working together and also to keep their link. And at the end, we believe that if we are able to build this safe place, so a place where you can meet with outstanding people in the same industry than you, so in the same space industry than you, and you can have trusted discussion, you can speak about the future of your industry, and probably something will come. We don't know what, but if we are not able to speak in a trustful manner with others, for sure we'll not have cooperations. And looking at the future, if you think about space debris, if you think about exploration, we will need to have infrastructure, so interfaces that can, fit with each other, where we will populate Mars, starting with the moon. It's quite important, I believe, that we can have a space which is safe, and where the most outstanding people of the space industry can discuss about this kind of future and how they see that.
Fascinating model, really fascinating. We need that. We need more of those safe spaces everywhere. But really fascinating. I mean, you've just walked us through the ecosystem, let's say, that is space and space tech. But aside from everything else you do, you are also involved in another very important ecosystem, a much smaller one, and that is the microbiome. You are a co-founder of the Microbiome Foundation that does all sorts of interesting work in terms of metabolic diseases and so forth. I'm just interested in how, obviously this is very different than space, but yes, how you got involved in this area. But two, it makes me think, when I do get on the SpaceX rocket 30
Yes.
years from now, whenever, you're sending my microbiome up there as well. Any interesting sort of space microbiome component to this, or is it separate from?
Okay. It started completely separated.
Okay.
And then in the future, perhaps, you can develop in space some crystals and some medicines that you wouldn't develop on Earth. So that's yeah. But no, it started very, very simple. Actually, one of my loved one, well, learned that that person was ill due to a disease of to a special disease. And so I asked myself, okay, what can I do? So I said, okay, perhaps I can try to help, research. And so I did a bit of due diligence about where you have the best researchers and etc. And then the doctors, I spoke with a few doctors to really understand a bit what could be done. So it was not directly about the microbiome, it was a very specific disease, etc. And then the doctors told me, oh, but someone else came with the same idea just a few months ago. You should speak together. So this is how I met one of my very best friends and a very good business partner, etc., whose name is Alfred Weissel. And we co-founded at that time. It was a very small foundation. It didn't have the name of a microbiome foundation. It was really focused on one very specific rare disease that we wanted to fight. And so we raised money. It went all well, etc. And we had some nice successes in research. And then what we discovered along the road, basically, is that that specific disease, which is I mean, it's a disease you die basically because of that disease, right? It's quite a serious disease. You really can delay the consequences of the disease if you take care of your microbiome. If you eat differently, and it has an effect on your body which is very, very significant. And I'm not saying this is replacing normal medicines, but it has a very, very significant effect. And experiencing that, basically, we said, okay, we need to expand basically our first foundation into something bigger, which is not focused anymore on one specific rare disease, but which is focused on the microbiome. Because if this is true for the disease we were focusing on, this is probably true for many other diseases. And this is what we discovered, along the road. So that's how the Microbiome Foundation was then created. And now indeed we fund research like on autism. For example, I mean, it has been proven that let's say if you influence the microbiome, you can actually have quite significant effect on the autism treatment. And this is mainstream. I mean, many people, unfortunately, are suffering from autism. So that's one of the, I think, of the research area where we have a lot of hopes here.
Got it. Well, just a couple wrap-up questions while I still have you. We get a lot of contact after we do these shows, and I know I got to get a lot after this one from the next generation, the kids that are graduating high school, maybe starting off. They're going to hear you. They want to follow what you've done. They want to be the next Hélène Huby. Some advice for the next generation that wants to get involved in space ventures. Tips, suggestions, please. Take that one any way you want to
go. Yeah, so I'm just really thinking. So yeah, for the one who'd like to do a career in space, or like to spend most of their life about building stuff in space, or I think one thing is, of course, it's obvious, but technique is really important. At the end of the day, it's about physics and etc. So I really encourage the young generation who say, okay, I'm attracted by space, basically, to really simply follow the very right studies and do space engineering, physics, etc. Because it's really important to understand the environment. So that's the first point. The second point is space has a tendency to be a very small family with people who spend most of their life in this industry or in this business. So I would encourage strongly people after, or in the middle of or whatever their studies, to spend some time in another sector. I've seen the value I've brought to, let's say, my industry just because I was coming from the digital environment. And you see more and more people who are entrepreneurs in space, and they are not space born, if I may say so. They've not spent most of their careers in space. I mean, of course, you take Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, that's sort of the kind of typical examples. But I see more and more entrepreneurs starting startups, etc., and they don't have a space background. So what I'm saying is that it's really good to do space engineering studies, etc., but it's also very, very good if you could spend some time outside space, especially at a time when, and we discussed that, space is going to be merged more and more with non-space industries for the utilization of data from space on the one hand, and for space exploration on the other hand. So that would be the second advice. The third advice is to go abroad. It's more and more difficult just for the reasons that we've explained. If you're an American, to spend some time in other countries, in doing space stuff. Of course, it's very important to be extremely respectful of ITAR regulations and fully aware of what it means, etc. But within the frame of ITAR, there is lots of things you can do. And I would recommend also to go abroad and to participate to space endeavor, startup abroad, etc. So this would be my three main recommendation. Work your physics and your math, and say do your homework. Second, spend time outside, and third, go abroad. And then for the rest, it's just an amazing industry. As I was saying, I think it's really unique in terms of team building. It's unique in terms of mindset because you have to be very precise. So there is it's not an industry of blah blah, and no, it's an industry of precision and exactitude. And this is something I really love in industry. And it's an industry also in whatever you do, it's bigger than you are. Yeah. So it's a great feeling actually to be part of that.
I can imagine that. Well, the final question, and just I have three children in the house here, and they turn the TV on and they watch Gravity and The Martian and Interstellar and all sorts of stuff like that. When you come home after a long day's work, do you ever want to watch any of that stuff, or do you tell your kids, no, I'm not interested in any of this space stuff, put on, I don't know.
No, I love space stuff, and well, my kids are very, very different.
Okay.
So two of them really like space stuff, and two of them are not so space geek, I would say. So at the end, I believe, as a mother of, well, I have 4 kids, but as a mother, really what matters is that they are happy, first and foremost, and second, that we come back to our discussion about the talents, right? Yep. They have talents, unique talents, and the question is to give them enough love and confidence so that they can express these talents. Then it would be in space or not in space, frankly, it's not important for me. What's important is that they express their talents. So we have some space discussions. Some are fascinated, some really want to understand. Some are telling me, you know what, you should hire me and I will solve your problems you have. Because of course, in a big program, we always have problems. That's part of the normal life of the program. And some, they just, they're just not so much interested.
Fascinating, outstanding. Well, Hélène, this has been a fascinating time talking to you. It's amazing the range of projects that you have under you and you're juggling around, but no one better to do it than you, it sounds like, and really wishing you the best with all of this. for everybody that's going to be watching this particular show on YouTube or listening on the podcast, you've been listening to Hélène Huby, Vice President at Airbus Defence and Space, working on getting astronauts back to the moon and beyond, democratizing space, creating Space 2.0, also co-founder of the Microbiome Foundation, founder of the Carmen Foundation, anchor partner, Unisocial Business, senior advisor, Red River West Venture Capital. A lot going on, Hélène. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. And really, as we say on the show, thank you for helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us here and out in space. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it has been a real pleasure on my side. And thank you very much for what you're doing. I think it's really great to be able and have the opportunity to pass hope and energy to the others. So thank you very much for what you're doing.
Absolutely, thank you.